Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. My name is Kate Doyle Bunker, and you are joining us for a conversation on navigating relationships with birth families. I am overjoyed to be spending the evening with you and with some of my counterparts, Kitty Ravert, who is out of our Central New York office, Trudy Kent, who is the program director for the Hudson Valley Agape program, who is also my supervisor. We have Kylie Regan, who is also from the Hudson Valley, who will be operating as our Oz this evening, the woman behind the curtain. Um, and we are so glad that you are able to be here with us this evening to talk about this really important conversation about how do we navigate relationships with the birth and or you can use the title birth, biological, first family of the children that we love so that we can provide the most complete picture for our children as possible. Some of the resources that we've drawn upon in part of our conversation this evening is the family of adoption, also the book 20 Things Adopted Kids Wish Their Adopted Parents Knew, and the book Beneath the Mask. We're also drawing from personal life experiences as everyone leading the conversation has a direct connection to the adoption constellation in different places in the adoption constellation. And we are so delighted to have you this evening. At this moment, I'm going to turn the mic over to Trudy Kent as she'll take us a little bit further.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. So tonight, as Katie said, we're going to be talking about navigating relationship with our first family. And I'll be talking about my experience. I have I adopted three non-genetic siblings from foster care. Their ages are 4, 8, and 9. And the process was very, I guess, the journey of navigating 3 different relationships with 3 different first/birth parents was very complex and challenging. I'm still in the first stages of still developing relationships, so I have a long way to go. You know, when I speak to Kitty and Katie, they're in their second part of their journey. So I'm in the first part of the journey, so that's why I'm going first. So as my journey started, now I realized how important it is for children to know their origin and their history. So I know that it's extremely important for me to flourish this relationship that I have and continue this relationship that I have with the first families of my children. We started fostering our first child in 2013. She was 3 days old. In the beginning, we could not establish a relationship with the first family due to fear of violence. So during that time, DSS would have my husband and I go through different doors. We would sneak us in the building, just the fear of something will happen to me or some kind of lash out of violence. So in the beginning, it was very challenging going into the situation, establishing a relationship with the first family. So due to the fears, the first several months, just being nervous of what's going to happen physically, emotionally, then I started to develop, I guess, judgments, unconscious, both conscious and unconscious bias, which led me to not being able to connect with the birth family. There were many disagreements in the beginning. The disagreements led to, when we started to connect, disagreements led to frustration, anger on my part. I couldn't go on vacation for several years with the child. They wouldn't approve it. And it was 4+ years of exhaustion, very exhausting of trying to navigate this relationship. And what makes it a little bit too much challenging, especially when you adopted from foster care, which at the time I didn't think about it, was the feelings of how the birth parents were feeling. they were going through their own feelings of resentment and anger, and also their frustration for having their child taken away. But I didn't put that in play in the beginning. After a while, I started to notice that, you know, we needed to get along. For some reason, no one told me this, but I realized that in order for us to come together for this little girl, there needs to be something that we need to have a better relationship. So I started to do little gifts. So on Christmas, I would take pictures of her professionally, put them in a frame, and I would give it to the family. Mother's Day, I would give a Mother's Day card, because the child was in foster care for 4 years, over 4 years. So what I learned in this time, that I needed to move from judgment to compassion. It took me some time. I needed to, if I was upset, I would use a social worker at the time to help me sort out my feelings of frustration. Some of the frustrations were, I fixed a child's hair. She's an African American child. You know, braiding takes a long time. I braid the child hair, they would take out the braids. You know, so all that frustration. But I would have to learn that, you know, something. I had to come. I put myself in in the parents' shoes. I had no. Don't get me wrong. I would scream and yell, but at the same time, coming back, still smiling, still understanding, not showing how hurt I was, but trying to be the bigger person in the whole situation, and giving grace in the situation. So at the end, it was bittersweet. We developed a pretty decent relationship, of understanding that we both love the child, and we both want the best for the child. And in the end, even though she relinquished her parental rights, it was a bittersweet moment, because we both cried, because it had to be the hardest thing she had to do for a child that she really loved. So I learned to understand, to empathize, to give grace. We talked about at the end how that, you know, she will always be in the child's life, but it was something that didn't just happen overnight. It took time. It took effort on my part, to realize how difficult the situation was, and we're still working on it. Right now at this particular time, and we're talking about she got adopted at 4 plus. She's 8 now. We see her several times during the year due to my, no matter when she calls, I will talk. I understand that my daughter that needs to know where she comes from. I develop a relationship with the paternal grandparents and get to meet some of the family, and so the daughter. So it's something that we're still working on, but it's something that my daughter is able to know, that I'm able to sit with her, her birth mom, and have a conversation. It's hard. It's hard to sit there, just to be sit there during a visit and watch the birth mom. I feel the sense of empathy, and when her daughter calls, our daughter calls, says "mommy" to me, I see her like hovered over and feeling a sense of shame and guilt. So it's really hard to me to watch that. At the same time, I try to nourish the relationship between birth mom and the daughter that I adopted. So it's a rocky situation. It's hard. Whereas my second child, Gigi, when I had my second child come into my home, I was a little bit seasoned. So now I decided this time I know now to develop a better relationship with, with the birth mom. So this time, relationship was started really quickly. I said hi, we were great. And a year later, birth mom disappeared. And for some reason, I went back to being angry, and because I didn't know why she disappeared. I didn't know what happened. So I go back into being judgmental and upset. And even though I eventually adopted I'm the second child, it was 5 years of not knowing what happened to her. And I remember in 2019, DSS called and said, okay, birth mom called, she wants to talk to you. Birth mom called asking where's her daughter, all this discussion, and they gave me the number to reach out, and I could not do it. I could not actually have a conversation. And I literally had to wait a year later after the pandemic. Pandemic made me think a lot of, I was like, oh my God, I didn't do it. So after the pandemic happened, I think she called again, and we were able to have a great discussion about what happened and her daughter, and that I'm adopted her, stuff like that. So that took me a year to move from anger and judgment, till I was able to have this conversation and sending her pictures, and and hopefully and eventually having this relationship with her. That's kind of tricky because my second daughter does not have anybody else besides this mom. There's no uncle, aunt, father that we know of. So it's really important, hopefully in the future, that we stay connected. So that was more of a, not saying simple, but that was something that I had to move from, my anger. I'm not sure why I was angry. I can't tell you, but I was just like, what happened? Like she just dropped off the face of the earth. But when I realized, not thinking a little bit more, and understanding that she's also going through shame and despair of not being in DSS and foster care. So again, so eventually thinking about, she may be tired of having to try to prove herself. So she just disappeared. I mean, a lot of birth parents go through that. And so I was able to understand that. Last but not least, what I find is that for my third child that I adopted, that I was unable to have a relationship with the birth parents due to their drugs and incarceration. So the next thing I was able to do is form a relationship with the maternal grandparents. It was challenging. It was challenging at the time. My son passes as white. His maternal grandparents are white, and I'm African American, as you can see. And so that situation was kind of tricky to navigate, but I knew it was important for me to have this relationship because I couldn't have the relationship with the birth parents. So it was 2 years. I invited them eventually. I mean, it was bold. It was a bold move, but I ended up on his second birthday inviting them to his birthday party at my house. They were able to see the family that he was a part of. They felt welcomed. This is 2 years in. It wasn't that easy, but they came in with a lot of preconceived notion that, unfortunately, because the birth father was African American, they believed the father had negative impact on their daughter. So they came into the relationship, with me being African American. There's all kind of preconceived notions, stuff like that. So I really had to work hard on developing this relationship, and I did work very hard developing this relationship. So I invited them to their house. They saw the birthday party, and due to me having such a wonderful relationship with the grandparents, just this year, the birth mom is out of jail, and she was able to call me to say thank you. My parents spoke so highly about you, and she apologized for the things that was just In the beginning, there was a lot of hiccups in the beginning, but we were able to have this wonderful conversation due to the fact that I kept this relationship, had this relationship with her parents. And due to her parents having such utmost liked me and everything, that it definitely transcends to how she felt. And so Kylie, so I guess basically at the end, it's not easy. I'm not, I'm still working on, these relationship, but basically what I got out of my situation was, was to put myself in their shoes, from their perspective, no matter how hard it was, and it was very hard. A spirit of openness, just being open to the fact of, being understanding, knowing that it's important, that this relationship is a very important relationship. And that with any relationship, they're going to be, any important relationship, they're going to be ups and downs, fights, not disagreeing, anger, frustration, but, coming together as individuals to know that we need to do this for the best interest of the child. Basically putting our differences aside, it benefits everyone. I learned, let's say, showing respect, towards an individual. And now my dad, something that it was so hard in some cases. Oh my gosh, it was so hard. Sometimes, it was just like, I was feel like I was being wronged, but sometimes I just had to either call somebody else and scream and yell, but, making sure no matter how crazy I felt, that I definitely showed respect. Because at the end of the day, you had so many different layers. You have DSS being the governing body of this whole situation, and they feel wrong. The birth parents feel wrong. Then you have the foster adoptive parents there who, they felt that took away, I'm saying, there's so many different layers. So I know that showing respect was very important. And moving from compassion, from judgment to compassion, it seeps in. We're human. I know it seeps in each situation I had. I had to okay, Trudy, I'm having these unconscious biases. I'm doing all these things. They should have did this. They should have did that. Why did I'm saying? So I really realized that there was a lot of judgment came in. And so once I start putting away the judgments, and start showing compassion, that's definitely helped. And do little things, just little things of giving a gift and giving pictures and, saying, wow, he has your eyes. And, those little things were really important. He or she looks like you, they have your nose, to show that I recognize that, that they came from them. And so that's from my experience and how I continue to deal with navigating my relationship. Anyone has any questions?
Trudy, I just wanted to share with anybody who's not familiar with the term on non-genetic siblings, means obviously that we're raising children in a sibling format, but that they aren't genetically linked. So that, as you said, you raise 3 children who you raise in one family unit, but you also then navigate a relationship with 3 entirely different sets of
Right.
biological first birth families.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Trudy, what is the age difference of your children?
So I have a 4-year-old, 8-year-old, and a 9-year-old.
Well, that's a lot to balance with the extra with the families and the relatives. That
it is, yes. And from different cultural, African American, Latino, and a child that passes as white.
I often
say,
I often say in navigating this, I'm navigating a relationship with almost like a divorce from people I didn't actually make a plan to marry, because I'm careful. I have to be careful of other people's feelings, and still keeping my feelings in check. Um, in the same way many divorced families have to keep things in check when dealing with previous in-laws, previous sisters-in-law,
Right.
grandparents. It can be a very complicated dance. And my own personal experience, I'll start with that both of my children who are preteens are well aware that I am participating in this conversation this evening and have given me permission to share certain pieces of their information, so for the benefit of other families, because I feel that that's an important part of what we do, is that there's a consent on their behalf to share parts of their story and their information. Um, and I'm the parent of a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. I have been parenting our 10-year-old since she was 2 days old, and I have been parenting our 12-year-old since for the last 9 years. They are non-genetic siblings, so I too navigate relationships with two different sets of birth families. I have a complication because I have one child who has a very robust family situation and one child who does not have that. So there are feelings between them of like, why don't I have a family member who comes to this, or why don't I have somebody who's interested in that? My child who has the more robust family um, has graciously brought the child who doesn't have the robust family into their family, so that the second child is always um, taken into consideration. There's always a birthday gift for that child. There's always a Christmas gift for that child. When we're invited, well, the way we navigate the situation is that if there's a family party, we go as a family unit. If we get together with the biological families, we go as a family unit, and they are invited as a family unit. And as I say this, I don't want to paint a picture that everything is rosy all the time. My child who has a robust relationship with um, grandparents and aunts and uncles, but cannot have that relationship, for the most part, has not had that relationship with their parents. And my different step in this role is that my children are now at the age where they have a voice. And specifically one child who very clearly defines their parameters. From the time my children were very small, we had conversations. I physically gave them permission to have whatever feelings they had. And I know that sounds silly, but especially with our children who come from us from hard places, wanting them to feel like that they didn't have to worry about my feelings. I'm an adult. I can handle my own feelings. You don't have to carry the burden of how I feel in this conversation. And you have permission to feel however you want to, and I will support you um, as they navigate their preteens and have feelings about their relationships. And as other people have come forward and wanting to have relationships with them, has become my job to almost be like the guard at Buckingham Palace. Like, I'm so sorry this child has said yes to this person and no to that person, and I'm sorry your feelings are hurt, but it's my job to carry out their wishes, because I have to be the soft place to land in this conversation. And also, when they say yes to somebody whom there may be safety guidelines in place, I then have to come up and go, okay, they're saying yes to you, but here's how it's going to go down. We're going as a family. We're going to a public place. They're not going off away with you. You're not going to try to get contact information. Your contact to them goes through me. There is no expectation of privacy. They are a minor. I am an adult. This is how it will be. If you can accept those terms, then, and since they're willing to at least try to have a relationship, I'm willing to support that. But it's very clear, like, we have an established family email, and my children are very clear that I'm going to be checking it, and I make it very clear to the adults in the conversation, I'm going to be checking it. I have to keep people in a safe parameter in this relationship. But that can be hard, and it can be hard when you have to keep other people's feelings in check, keep my feelings in check. I've been lucky enough to work for the coalition for the last 5 years, and I often have to talk to adoptive parents about how we have to make friends in the adoptive community. If you don't happen to have friends in the adoptive community, I highly recommend it, because because our own friends are wonderful, terrific human beings. They may or not be parents. They've experienced different things, and they are a wealth of information. But when something goes down that is specifically to an adoptive and foster family situation, and you just need to blow off steam, you need to get in the car and call that person who knows what you're talking about. That's the person who will help talk you off the ledge. I mean, we're here and we have a helpline, and our helpline person is fabulous. But having a person in the community, in the adoption community, that you can blow off steam with, and it can be from the little to the small. When one of my children had a major life event, and a gift that I had planned to give the child for this major life event, they were making First Holy Communion. I bought them a cross. I was very excited about it. About a week and a half before First Holy Communion arrives, that child gets a cross from their maternal grandmother. And I was like, doesn't, and I got in my car, because I didn't want my child to be in the middle of it. I didn't want them to have to hear it. I didn't want them to have to feel conflict. I get in the car, I call my best adoptive friend, and I'm like, don't you think they might have wanted to ask the mom, blah, 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 blah. And I went on for 15 minutes, and they're like, okay, so now what are you going to do? I'm gonna pull up my big girl pants, and I'm going to go in the house and tell them how glad I am that they have this, and how much I'm sure they'll enjoy wearing it. I'm going to put the other one away for confirmation. And when confirmation rolls around, I'm going to tell you right now, we're also going to buy a Holy Spirit medal, and I'm telling everybody ahead of time I'm doing it. Because had it become a tug of war between, again, you're navigating that relationship very much like a divorce. Like, I don't want you to pick sides. I don't want you to feel like you have to pick sides. Was I disappointed? Had I planned for years to do something? Absolutely. Has it gone that way at other times? Yes. Again, the child with a robust family comes from a family that bakes very beautiful, elaborate cakes. They're gorgeous. My cakes are not gorgeous, but my cakes are really delicious. And I have had to at several times say to myself, okay, step away. You're actually seeing the child on their birth. You actually have the child in your house for their birthday. You can make the cake on their birthday. Step away, step out of your own skin, and let them go forward. Let him enjoy the cake that his grandmother makes, because all of the other kids in his family get this beautiful cake, and you don't want to be the reason why he didn't grow up having these cakes. And it seems like such a small thing, but these little things, as they build up over time, your feelings build up, and you have to be able to step away and knock yourself out of the conversation. For those of us who have things like voluntary surrenders, so many of us have things like a letter and a picture every year, and the importance of being able to step out of the situation. When I write my, thank you very much, Kylie. When I have to write my letter, I don't write, oh, we took him here, or we took him there, or he did this, and here's a picture of our beautiful family doing this. There are very specific targeted pictures I take over the years on the nondescript wall in our house. So many pictures on this one plain wall, because again, there are safety concerns. So I don't give information that can be tracked down. You'll never see me put up on either social media or in this information, like, look, they graduated from this school and they had this teacher and their first day of school was such and such. That's never going to happen in my world. Do we take them? Sure. Are they sitting in my hard drive? Absolutely. Am I sharing them with anybody? Not a chance on the planet. But I'm able to write, your son did this year. Your son played in the band this year, and he did it, and he was trumpet playing, and he did great. Your son continues to work hard at being a scout, and he's achieved such and such a level at scouts. And in order to do that, he had to do this and that and the other thing to get there. Do I know that I am mom in this situation? Absolutely. There's not a doubt, a moment in time that I don't know that I'm the mom in all of this, but I don't have to be the mom in my conversation with them. My child's not confused. For the longest time, when he was little, we'd refer to us as, I was mom and my first name is Kate, and his other mom was mom and her first name. Now if he's sitting in the car and he says something like, oh, we should put that in the stuff to send to mom, I know I'm driving. I know you're not talking about me. So it's that fluidity that they're allowed to talk about people without having to worry about my feelings. Am I caught up in it? And there are times when I have to navigate the relationship. Recently, the child with a robust family, was invited to something. And he cautiously said yes. And then at the last minute said no. And worried about like how it was going to impact other people and affect other people. I'm like, I got this. You go with dad, you go to the store, grab some bagels. We'll have some, we're going to have bagels and cream cheese when you get back. I'm going to make the phone calls while you're gone. And that's what we did. Were people disappointed? Absolutely. Did people have feelings about it? Absolutely. Did he have to deal with it? Not a bit, not a speck, not a drop. Because again, I'm that buffer. I'm the guard at Buckingham Palace. You won't pass through me and his wishes get carried out. But it's not easy to be that person. And again, it's a lot like being divorced from people that you didn't choose to marry. Would it be easier to pretend? So many of us are kind of live in that world where it might be easier not to have to navigate this. But as our adult adoptees, which is kind of our barometer in this conversation, and some of them came together in the book 20 Things Adopted Kids Wish Their Adopted Parents Knew. Being given permission to have these relationships is important to the adoptee. And when we're adoptee focused, what is it that the adoptee is telling me at the age that they're able to tell us? From our young children to our middle schoolers to our adults, we have to be able to say, I know what my role is and I know what my value is. Because it's not about, because we will, in some places in the world that we tread in, we will sometimes be treated like the long-term babysitter. And having a sense of who I am in the conversation makes me more able to be empathetic to, I get to hang out with this person every day. They're my favorite people in the universe, even though they're little people, young people, they're my favorite people in the universe. I get to walk the walk. I get to show up for all of their events. I get to hear about what's going on in their brain. I have empathy and compassion for someone who doesn't get that opportunity. And our adult adoptees are telling us both adoptive and birth parents can make a significant and vital contribution to our children's development. In addition to that, our children walk around with this sense of not necessarily being full. Like they've got this open space, and being able to close some of that space by sometime a relationship with their birth family, sometimes a relationship with a birth parent, sometimes they can't. I know that there are some of us who are participating this evening who may have incomplete information. Their children they have adopted children who they have no birth family information for, or they've adopted children who have unsafe birth parents. But maybe you can find a grandparent, a godparent, an aunt, an uncle, a former neighbor, a former teacher, who your child can have a relationship with, that gives them a connection between point one and point two, and helps them to feel like a more complete person. And looking at our children who come from tough places, who we don't have complete information for, and being honest with them and saying, I'm sorry, I'm truly sorry, I don't have this for you. But I wonder if that's where you get your beautiful green eyes from. I wonder if that's where you get your open and compassionate heart from, is sometimes the best that we can do. And even for parents who have made life choices that we wouldn't want to say we've made, to be open and go, all right, you know what, especially as our children get older and they gather more information, because we have to be honest with them. We have to be honest. We don't have to slap people down with it. We have to tell the truth, and we have to do it in such a way that is appropriate for their age. When we do that, we can also be compassionate. Yes, I know that this is what this person did. Yes, I know this is how you wound up coming into care. Yes, I'm really sorry that had to happen. But you know what? On the other side, that drawing that they sent to you during visitation that we kept for you, that's really lovely. I bet that's where some of your great artistic talent comes from. Acknowledge and giving them permission to be happy about something that they're like with their birth parents. If their birth parent is fantastic at dancing and they are fantastic at dancing, if we don't give them permission to appreciate where they come from in that conversation, all of a sudden someone starts hiding a talent because they don't want to be associated with the bad guy in the situation. I wanted to give a moment for if anybody had a question, or I'd then love to switch over to my colleague Kitty. Kitty, take it away.
Okay. So a lot of what I am going to be referring to that you'll be reading is from the book Beneath the Mask. This has been very valuable to me. It's Understanding Adopted Teens. And I also I actually tried to get my son to read. I actually have a script. I'm not the greatest public speaker, so I do like the safety of the written word on the page. And he said to me, "Oh, Mom, it's okay. You know, you can even use my name. Everybody knows me anyway." And he has worked for the coalition in the past. So I come to you with a different frame of reference. Our now 22-year-old adopted son lived with his mother and two sisters until the age of 9. At 9 years old, he was first removed from his home and he was placed in foster care. He was placed with a woman who was later diagnosed with cancer and could no longer care for him. There was another trial run back home with Mom that resulted in yet another placement. This placement disrupted due to issues of felt safety from both sides, being the adoptive parents and my son. My husband and I received our first call from DSS foster care asking if we were willing to take an 11-year-old boy who was a runner. My husband and I were in agreement and stated at our MAPS foster care training class that we would be a foster home that would help provide respite for the biological parents to get the help they need in order to receive their child back and try again. This young man arrives at our home straight from lacrosse practice with his caseworker. At this point, I'm creating a list of opportunities to connect with this boy. What have I seen that could provide some genuine, I want to get to know you communication? Well, he has a good rapport with his caseworker, and he seems open and engaged. He must like sports, so I ask, "Do you like sports?" And he replies as he looks at me and smiles, "Just lacrosse." Well, this is off to a good start. He smiles and looks at me. This equates to me that he likes me and he will not be a runner in our house. Oh, yes. Those days of being so concrete and thinking within the traditional mindset used with my husband and my 4 biologicals, that this will be received as to build a sturdy foundation, was about to be tested. I would later find out that what is presented on the surface may have a totally different meaning in the heart. After just a few weeks in our home, his good friend from school died in a tragic 4-wheeler accident. We went to the funeral together, and I was mindful that he had already had a history with loss due to death. And this may be hard, so I asked him, "How you doing?" I thought I'd be there for him, being there. What does that really mean? Could being there mean you will bookmark this event to hold space and be sensitive to the process? The process. Does this mean that there may be more to unearth in the future? In my adoptive parent story, there wasn't much of my son's story that I would have to withhold, but there sure was a lot that I was holding with him. As we progressed, I found out my interpretation of his past was different than his. I thought my availability to provide safety and security was sufficient. Later, after my son's graduation from high school, I learned that he needed from me to be present was actually to spend quality one-on-one time with him. And this would make sense because here we are in a home with my husband and my 4 biologicals. He shared that he took this love language test and confirmed the gift of time was his love language. So I was thinking, could anxiety be why he was labeled a runner? Coming to us on the brink of puberty, yet being a little emotionally delayed, we would have seen sadness, yet sadness carried a trail even until his 20th year. He had sat at the dining room table and announced that he would need to find another picture he had framed for us as a soldier in his uniform with Ravert over his pocket. He was downhearted that he couldn't give his bio mom this picture. At this time, he also told me that he would be changing his last name to his original family name. I asked why, and his response was so valuable to understand. He said he wanted to make his grandpa proud, that this name would be carried on by a soldier, by a man of God, by a sensitive and sincere person, by a hardworking guy who enjoys a challenge. I was 100% behind this choice. I haven't witnessed anger in my son. I guess anger could have been times he shuts down and disengages. I have seen a bit of frustration, but that's usually something he gives times towards resolving on his own. When thinking of the relationships I needed to develop with our son's bio mom, I knew that I needed to be consistent with my yeses for his visits. I was all for him continuing this thread that was reinforced by his identity as a different culture, his identity as helping to be the man of the house, his identity as the baby of the family to his two elder sisters. I knew I needed to be pleasant, and mostly I knew I needed to come to terms of forgiveness, both towards his bio mom for her having such a hard, strained life as she had raising children. And I also had to have forgiveness to myself for thinking I could do a better job. I needed a dose of humility, and I got it. The adoption in our small town was actually on the local news. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was excited that my son and I were asked to speak at the after reception. When the TV station asked to speak to our son, I left that decision up to him. Fast forward 3 years. His mother calls to talk to him, and he's not home. She chats with me and shares from her heart. She told me that news clip and the newspaper story had really affected her. She said she had isolated and was in fear to go out in public since everyone knew her failure. I was deeply moved to understand the heart of that mama. And I said I was sorry that I wasn't sensitive to her and her family. I often wonder if this conversation planted a seed with this mom that may grow without me even knowing it. I did feel that we were heart connected after this conversation, and I was grateful that she had shared such personal information with me. Ah, the good old days, that communication would flow through me since his mother would need to dial my cell phone to arrange visits and events. When our son earned his cell phone, I was no longer in the loop of communication. My son would tell me what the plans were and asked if there was anything else going on at that time. I had a dream. Our son would have a job, earn money, and drive a car. In this dream, he would invite his mom out for dinner by picking her up, paying for her dinner, and taking her home. This, to me, was his ability to stand strong on his own and offer sweet care to his mom. This has happened, and this dream actually protected me from being jealous. Our son aged, and we noticed certain decisions he made and how he would treat people, namely girlfriends. We knew this may be a good time to talk about where he first noticed what a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship looked like. There were many scenarios that he would have caught as a way to treat someone instead of being taught on how to be respectful and sensitive to the needs of others. For him to go back to the seed of this romantic relationship observations in his own home, he was able to visit some facts at a developmentally key time. As I capitalized on spent time with him, usually at the dining room table when no one was home, he would tell me about his plans to have 2 weddings. He and his girlfriend had been dating for 5 years, and he told me he'd have one with his biological family and one with us. I asked, why? Well, he figured we were very different. There was differences in the music we listened to, how we partied. He was concerned that people would not feel comfortable with a combined ceremony. This became my prayer that on this special day, we would be blended and offered a shared memory of one event. I'm happy to report that that prayer has been answered just last month. He had sent out a Facebook request to a bunch of people, and it was the first time he was doing it. Usually I would do the guest invitation list to his annual celebration, which would be his birthday at his happy place, the camp he is a counselor at for 6 weeks every summer. The same camp he was referred to when a concerned elementary school teacher thought he may need a getaway to New York State Sheriff's Camp. My son has had a pay it forward mindset regarding this camp experience that changed his life. This year, he invited his mom and her boyfriend. It just so happens that my husband and I arrive an hour ahead of time to set up the food and decorate. Usually our son will present to hang out and help. Well, this year he was sleeping, and his mom and her boyfriend arrived 15 minutes after us. We had a whole 45 minutes to be together alone. This was a mutually enjoyable time of setting up and decorating. There were kind words, joking, and laughter. I mentioned our son's idea to have 2 weddings. His mother quickly responded, "There's no need for that." Yahoo! Oh yeah, later that day, our son took his mom out on a rather choppy sailboat ride. I stood at the water's edge, very emotional that his mom was totally dependent on her strong, capable young man that was our son. I was sure never to speak bad about my son's bio mother. I was also very sure not to recap our process adult conversations within our family home where children could hear and make their own observations through a lens of a hurt child. When our son was 18, he did ask me why he didn't have a choice in the adoption. Well, this took me by surprise, since the recount of that was that 2 years after he had been placed with us, we were called for a court visit. And at the courthouse, there's 2 different waiting rooms. I went to the first waiting room and sat down and didn't even notice that his mother was sitting across the room. I started to feel like, well, maybe I should move. And besides, it stinks in here. It smells like sour milk. I think I'm going to be sick to my stomach. And I just felt the need to go over and sit next to her and say to her, you know, I have to tell you something. I thank you so much for raising such a kind, well-mannered young man. She looked at me and she shook her head and she said, no one has ever said that to me. And I said, I only tell the truth. She got up, left, and the next thing I knew, it was time for me to be escorted into another room because she had signed off. And we were to call Rashad at, well, he said I could say his name. We were to call our son at lacrosse practice again and tell him what had happened. So I called him all excited. Hey, do you want to be our son and have our house be your forever home? And he said, yes. But could my excitement have shaded his thoughts? Did I give him enough space? I was thankful that he was working this out in his mind at the age of 18. He was still trying to figure out, wait a minute, maybe it could have worked with my mom. There's always been a struggle within the relationship of my son's birth father. I was careful to only offer facts as they were requested. These were usually hard questions asked every so often. Did my dad call? No was the only sufficient answer, unless he asked why. That question was never asked. As a foster parent, we were required to take our foster children to therapy and for medication checks. Although the therapist was not adoption competent, she was perfect since she had a guitar in her office. My son immediately asked to play it, and as he played, he was able to think more clearly and be more relaxed to answer questions. He actually looked forward to the next session in order to play. This was our first indication that he loved making music. He is gifted at playing drums, bass guitar, piano, and guitar, all self-taught. There was so much more we could offer at home in ways of therapy. That running I referred to earlier, do you wonder if he ran with us? Heck yes, he did. I knew there was an unmet need, and he was not going to take this to make my life miserable. Yet I also was very aware as a foster mom that I was responsible for him. When the sun set, I was so worried that I would be in trouble because our foster son was unaccounted for. I had a genius idea. After the first few unplanned departures, I had our eldest son follow him on his bike. He found where he went. This is where I marry his past coping to run, equipped with a backpack of survival tools, to a wooded area on a hill behind a school down the road, to today, his current cup filling as he drives with a new set of survival tools of emotional infilling to the wooded area along a lake at a camp he dreams to be at each year. Nature is his medication. Music is his medication. If the truth is not the baseline, it would be very difficult to manage reality and to keep a trustworthy relationship with your child. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Kitty. That was beautiful. Thank you, Katie, also. Thank you.
So we'd really like to open up the floor to anyone who's here. Certainly adoption stories, navigating relationships are as individual as grains of sand, but it's a space that we have open for anybody who has questions, experiences, suggestions on what's worked for them as they've navigated. Nobody's pretending that it's easy, or that that families can come together, that families can always come together. Amy, we'd love to hear from you.
I just have a question. We're just starting this process. Our little has been with us for 14 months as a foster son. Today's the 11th of August, I believe. On the 9th, the mediation paperwork was filed. We thought it was going to be a long process of mediation, and surprisingly, Mom, without a fight, voluntarily surrendered her rights on all 4 of her kids. We have 1, and then the other 3 are with other homes in kind of close proximity. Being that he's 4, how do we proceed when Mom wants nothing? She doesn't even want a yearly update. How do we tell him going forward? I guess we're looking for tips on how to address this going forward. Because I don't want him to not know, but.
How old is he?
He's 4.
That's a lot of processing. And there may be things that as time evolves, starting from when our children are tiny, we start to lay groundwork about mental health, about the other people's life experiences, and how the things that might have broken down other people's ability to be in relationship with us. You might, there are times where you might start a box of things that he might want to share later, not necessarily with her, but things about him that he might want to share with somebody else later, that could turn into something he shares with that person at a later time. Just because somebody says something today about this now doesn't mean 5 years from now they won't be in a different emotional place, a different emotional state, and be looking for an opportunity that you will then have to navigate with your child, and seeing how they feel best about navigating it. I have one child who came to us, who entered our family through a voluntary surrender, and one child who entered our family through a TPR. The voluntary surrender child I have an obligation to write. I write a little book up for their parent that has their letter in the book, because anybody who has to write the letter knows that it's a very difficult letter to write when you can't give specific details. You can't say something like, "Oh, their team was first in the state," because then you can look up who's first in the state, and then you have a locator. I still make the book for the other child, even though there's not an obligation for their parent, and the Department of Social Services won't even make the effort to get it to them. And I put it in their box, that they, for someone they want to share with later. All of our other family photos are integrated into all the things we do about a family, but this specific book that gets printed every year is specifically about this child and their year. And if there's somebody at a later time they want to share it with, they have that ability to share it with. And a very important part of that conversation is also going to be making sure that the siblings have an opportunity to be in a relationship with each other, because they are the innocent bystanders in all of this.
I know. So in our case with the siblings, unfortunately, the siblings are triggers to each other. They only see each other virtually every other week for 30 minutes over. It's basically a Zoom meeting every other week for 30 minutes. It's been that way since October. It seems to work right now. Unfortunately, our 4-year-old is a chatty Cathy sometimes, and he has told birth mom exactly what I do for a job, and he refers to us as mom and dad. Honestly, they came to us at 6:30 in the morning. At 7:15, my heart broke for the first time when he said, "You gave me 2 bowls of cereal and a cup of juice. I'm going to call you mom now." So he's called us, to him, we've been mom and dad the whole time. We tiptoe lightly because we are first responders in our community, and we have dealt with mom through the first response side of our life. So she knows exactly who he's with and where he is. And all she said when she said, I don't want anything going forward, is at least he's with someone safe. So
I mean, that's really a hard situation. I totally everything that Katie said. I would say that, as Katie said, is continue to harness to have that relationship with the brothers, because even in my situation, even though I couldn't have a relationship with with the first family, I was able to do it with grandparents, which led. So as Katie said, eventually, who knows? She may be feeling shame and anger and resentment right now. What's going on? Who doesn't know that 5 years later, 10 years later, she may, because since she has an idea who you are, where you live,
right.
She may reach out. So my second child, mom, as I said, I was angry. She disappeared. We had a great relationship.
Right.
And 5 years later, she called, and it took me some time, because I had to, and it took me some time to eventually to connect with her. But, in that time, they go through so much. So continue relationship with try to have a relationship, him to have a relationship with his siblings, if it's 5-10 minutes or whatever on Zoom,
right.
as they grow, because I have my last child is a set of there's 5 of them. And when you put 2 of them together, it's just like, okay, let's end. You know?
Right.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is a bad idea, you know. But we know that I have a relationship with all the adoptive parents that has,
Okay.
I have a relationship with the adoptive parents, and we all call and say, so and so is doing this. So I get to know, me getting to know the other siblings, get to give me a better understanding of my little, my little one. So I would
Right.
say continue relationship, have him still talk, you know, that's very important. Needs to know the siblings, and no one knows what's going forward, you know, what if she's going to change her mind. So
Right.
what you're doing right now, it's amazing. At least you know it's important, and just get to know the other adoptive parents.
And I just wanted to point out, when it comes to the siblings, um, about emphasizing their spot in their child's life. One of my children has a sibling that was adopted before my child was born, and they don't get to see each other a lot. But when they do, I realize I put value. I let that child who's older than my child, obviously, know that they have value and that I'm glad that they're together. And when that child has been in my home, that they realize that there are pictures of that the 3 siblings, the 3 kids together. Like, you are a part of our very complicated constellation of family. And she has a picture on the wall. There's pictures of them included, just like there are nieces and nephews, just like there are other family members.
We do too. I'm actually looking at it on the fridge now. We have pictures of him with his sisters and a picture of him with his brother. His brother was with us for the first 10 months of the 14 months, and unfortunately needed more care and help than we were trained for. And he went to a different home where he's thriving. He actually calls us from his new foster family's mom's cell phone a couple times a week just to talk and update us how he's doing. He's 7, and he ends every phone call with, "I love you guys, and I can't wait till next time we get to play together."
I wanted to open the floor to anybody else who had questions, comments, different life experiences. Anyone who would like to share, we'd love to hear from you. Trudy, I know one of the things that so many of us, as adoptive foster parents, have dealt with is the idea of sometimes being treated like a long-term babysitter. And certainly Kitty might have an opinion on that. Is there anything that you can think of that's helped you as you navigate that relationship of that kind of like, you're not really the parent, you're just the Trudy in this situation?
I think in the beginning, I think in 2 out of the 3 kids I've adopted, especially the first, in the beginning, I guess it was challenging, especially with the grandparent, the paternal grandparents. And so, you know, which is hard, you know, because this is their grandchild that I'm taking, that I have in my home. And unfortunately, you know, it didn't go the way they expected to go. And so just to when I have conversation with them, I basically you know, talk about, are your grandchild is doing well, you know, that is hard. And I get at the same time is empathizing, you know, as you say, Katie, is just like being the bigger person in the situation and not take things too personal. And so I do have things come at me in certain ways, and I just got to like, okay, it has to be hard knowing that you don't have your grandchild at this particular moment, and but to also make them know that I'm here. We both love this particular child. It's our responsibility to, not only my responsibility, for her to call you, or for me to call you, but you are welcome to have to call and ask about your grandchild. That's I'm not a babysitter. I'm saying that you could call. You're welcome to call. You are part of the family, and so that's something that I continue to work on up to this day. And I actually live 9 minutes away from them. I moved to when I moved, 9 minutes away from the family, so it, yeah, it's any relationship, you have your ups and downs, and you just got to continue working on it. And so I'm still navigating the relationship with the grandparents with my first child.
And there are sometimes really big safety concerns. My kids are not known by their first names in any kind of social media platform. They both have an online a persona. My one child was about 3 when he asked if he could just be Superman, and Superman grew into like how people refer to him, how I refer to him in a social media and in the social media. So a couple of years later, when he was playing baseball, and we took his baseball picture, which was strategically cut to not show team names or town names or any of that stuff, and we had it turned into a baseball card. I had their personas printed on their baseball cards, so they cards were printed up with Superman bunker and Wonder Woman bunker, and gave as much information that was safe for them to, because I know and that when I tell a family member that I'm basically saying the same thing that I would shout out in a public hallway, that I refer to my kids as 10-10 wins, all the news all the time, even as old as they are. So I know if I give you a baseball card with their picture, that's getting its way back to their first parents. And if there are safety questions, if there are safety things and concerns, I also take the responsibility off your shoulder. If you get a modified picture, then you aren't responsible for hiding something from somebody else, because there isn't anything to know. If I give you a picture of first day of school, and I put that out on the Friday of the week that every school goes back, I don't put it out on Wednesday when kids throughout my district are going back, but I wait till Friday, because then every school in my area is back on my underscript wall. Well, then you share in that, and you're part of that, but I've still kept my child safer in a school situation. So there's always a way to try to include somebody in the situation without necessarily compromising certain things. And unfortunately for some families, there are such intense safety situations that you do have to compromise. And I always say it's better to have a plan and not need it, than need a plan and not have it. The first time one of my children met a relative who I couldn't have guessed whether or not there was going to be cooperation, whether or not there was going to be, whether or not one of the birth parents was going to be there, I called the restaurant that we were going to be eating at, and I explained to the manager what was happening and said, can you help me if we need to make a quick exit? Can somebody from the staff help us get out like a back door? We met in a very big public place. For us, it's the Palisades Mall, so about an hour and a half away from our home, but it's a huge place that we could have gotten out in a public forum. And we had a plan. We had cash to pay bills, so we didn't have to wait for things. My husband and I had a plan that, if anything happens that's not pleasant, I'm going to grab him. I'm going to go to a movie, because that's 2 hours to sit quietly while my husband, who's kind of a big guy, negotiated the situation, and we could text and then keep our child as safe as possible. My husband met the people away from the restaurant that we were sitting in, because had the birth parent been there, and it was not a safe situation, he would have just said, "We're good. I'll see you later." Texted me, and the child and I would have exited the restaurant. I said to my child, had this crazy conversation with him. I'm like, what would happen if the mall started to flood and the pipe above us open? I'm like, if I said it's the wild, wild west, would you be able to like crawl over the top of this? And he's like, oh, and he was little. Oh yeah, I can do that. I was like, great. If mommy says to you, it's the wild, wild west, you climb over this and we're going on an adventure. Did I need any of that? Nope. Was the visit uneventful but pleasant? Absolutely. I didn't need any plan that I made, but I had a plan, and we had a safe, and there were safety issues right there, so we were open and engaged and ready for that child to have a relationship that they wanted to, but still had a safety plan in play.
Katie, I just love how you put so much thought into before the what ifs, because I think that I missed that totally. But then as I listened to you and as we were preparing for this, I was like, oh, I need to do that sometime, but that is really awesome how you are able to develop that plan just in case.
But also not then tying my child into being afraid of the situation or pre-painting their experience for them. If I said to them, if there's a problem, if there's a problem with this person, we're going to go out this door and we're going to do, nope. I know that, and I have a safety phrase for my children that I have practiced since the time they were tiny people. And when they hear it, when they were little, they knew that there was going to be a reward for hearing it. So sometimes it was that we randomly got ice cream, or that I always had M&Ms, so much so that a pack of Cub Scout boys, whenever they hear it, look around for Mrs. B because she's going to give you M&Ms. But I knew in a public place, I might need to get my children's attention, and keep them safe, but they need to be up and looking at me. So if I said it, they heard it, they knew that it would be a positive for them. I never needed it, but I had a plan in play. So that way we were able to be in more situations, we were able to experience more things and build up relationships. And so much so that my one child's oldest sister gave a reading at my youngest child's first Holy Communion, because that's the relationship they have with each other. But that takes time, effort, energy, recognizing that the adoptee is the center of the conversation, that wanting them to experience as much as they can from their relationship with the people they love, so that they are as whole as possible, is my focus. And that keeps me out of the situation. That keeps, well, my feelings might be hurt of such and such. My focus is that the adoptee is as centered in this conversation as possible, and can build the best that they can. And I'm kind of to the side of this. But I'm sure Kitty and Trudy both touched on that in their conversations. Kitty, I'm sure, was very used to putting on her child's birthday celebration independently, and then having somebody else be part of the conversation. It's about stepping to the side and going, you haven't had the chance to do this in a while. So yes, I think that maybe we should have had the cake over here, but if you want to put the cake over there, be my guest. I'd love to hear from somebody else.
Angela, yes, I think I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell like a kind of funny story. So the first time that I ever thought foster care and safety, I was in the grocery store and I had 3 foster kids, all under the age of 5. And the baby that I had, I turn around and his mom is behind me in line. And she had been considered like very unsafe, very mentally unstable. And, you're trying to pay, put the stuff on the counter. He's climbing out of the cart, trying to go to mommy, right? I'm in sheer panic at this point. And I could not believe it. 2 people behind me was a caseworker. It wasn't his caseworker, but it was one of the caseworkers that I had worked with in the past. And she looked at me and she just came up and stood right between us. But at that point I was like, I never thought about, if I'm at a store or, like something like that. Now I know, to kind of be aware, look around, always But yeah, it was an interesting, yeah.
And so many of us who have parented children who've been part of the foster care system frequently parent children who have lived in the county that we live in. And some of us live in very small places, as Amy shared her experience in connection. And Tree says she lives 9 minutes from a birth family. And I know I've certainly had a child who, my husband was in the grocery store with the child one day, and they said the child's name, and my husband looked at them and he goes, "Oh, that's my stepmother's grandson." Well, thank you so much for keeping us in the loop with that conversation.
We actually only, this will sound terrible, we actually only do grocery shopping, our main grocery shopping, by Instacart. And I'm very selective on what drivers I will let deliver to our house. And if we have to get anything else, we go to the 4-year-old. We know his mom doesn't have a car, so she can't get out to our local Price Chopper, which is about 10 miles from our house. So we'll go to Price Chopper to get what else we need.
And Amy, you have a plan? We have 9 more minutes.
Yep.
So does anybody has any comments?
Or if you need a certificate for participation this evening, in the chat portion is Kylie's email. Kylie, who was our amazing Oz this evening. If you email Kylie, she can get you a training certificate for your time this evening. Occasionally things, as we know, nothing ever just happens. Nothing great ever happens before 5 on a Friday, especially for those of us who have participated in the foster care system. Sometimes you have a random question. We do have the helpline, which is manned 24/7. So we have a terrific team of people who are connected to the adoption constellation, so that you are always able to reach out to the helpline, and I will put the helpline number in the chat in just a second. In addition to that, we do have the Facebook page, which is restricted, but if you're there, you can ask to be a member of it, but it is a place where some of our parents can. Thank you so much, Kylie, you rock. Kylie has put the phone number for the helpline in the chat. If something comes up and you want to ask a general question, or how do I do this, and you want to kind of pull across the state, you've got a lot of experience and wisdom there, and you can take that information in and see if that might apply to your situation. And frequently the staff, for anybody who doesn't know, the staff is also connected to the adoption, foster and guardianship constellation. They almost everybody has some kind of form of live life experience with that. We'll jump in also and say, "Oh, have you considered this? Do you know that? This is how so and so will jump in and say, "Oh, this is how I navigated that." Again, it's very helpful to have a friend in the adoption community who understands what you're going through and that the complications of navigating
that. I've said this before too, but a friend asked me, it was Mother's Day, and she was like, "Is it appropriate to send a card on Mother's Day?" And it's just things like that you cannot just ask your best friend. You have to have people that are in the know. And so love what's happening here.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you so much, Trudy, Katie, and Kitty, so much for sharing your stories. Really appreciate it. And it's been an honor getting to be your Oz. So thank you.
Thank you, Kylie. I truly appreciate it.
I love how you dress up my words. Thank you.
Well, everyone, has been a pleasure to be with you guys today at this late hours and for us to share our stories. We thank you so much. Thank you so much, Renee. We could get into, we've been back and forth, tears and crying through this challenging, there's a lot of tears and sweat because we all had so much emotions talking about our stories. And so even though we just came to you as today, it's just been a lot of tears just to prepare for this. This is a very emotional topic in every aspect, both personally for us as an adults who's navigating and guarding and protecting our child, at the same time holding birth parents, knowing that this relationship is an important relationship for our kids to know their origin. So it's just been a very lot of tears, a lot of weeks of crying to get it down to to an hour and a half, because we could have went on for literally days. So I want to thank Kitty, I want to thank Katie and Kylie. I totally appreciate it. This has been very challenging. It's continued to be challenging, but knowing that we are here, everything is not a cookie cutter, because every situation is different. As you can see, how we navigate it, no, it's not one set rules for navigating this complex relationship with our birth families. But at the same time, we know that if we can, eventually, there's going to be a lot of questions, because my 8-year-old is asking a lot of questions at this point. And so, I know it's important. So however you could do it, and the best way, if it's not the birth parents, is family members or siblings, try to reach out, because they always have questions. And when they're at appropriate age to know a little more and more, then we continue to build on the truth. So as each of us says. So we just want to thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a good night. And thank you.